some more conversations from the Mumbai First initiative where one is discussing whether Mumbai indeed can be a world mega city. We have with us now Mr. Joeri Aulman, who is a representative of Dutch companies, platform of Dutch companies. Joeri, it's great to be talking to you. And I understand that you've been actually staying in the city of Mumbai for 6 years, and you've been involved in lots of interesting projects as a consultant, exchanging ideas, including on the current airport, and perhaps a plan and possibilities for the new one. Is that right?
That's correct. We, as a consultancy group from the Netherlands, have been assisting the existing Mumbai airport with its master plan for GVK. We are now talking to the state authorities about a possible alternative backup plan for the Navi Mumbai airport, since it's facing such difficulties with land acquisition, environmental opposition, etc.
Okay, fair enough. So what are the options before Mumbai? Because we know this is a city surrounded by sea, there are too many multiple agencies, it's heavily congested. I mean, the existing airport already feels like it's bursting at the seams. So what are the options really?
Well, one of the options for a coastal city like Mumbai is to look seawards and look at the Bay Area and consider reclamation as a possible way of giving some breathing space to the city, creating new infrastructure, and that's where this idea of even creating the airport on an island fits in.
Sure. What's the Dutch experience in this? Because typically, the moment you think of reclaiming land and the whole, marina area, issues about environment and ecology, they always come to the forefront.
That's right. Well, the Dutch experience, we've had centuries of experience with reclamation as such. I think 1/3 of our country is on reclaimed land. And especially in the past few decades, we've had a very strong environmental lobby, a social lobby as well, not unlike you have here in India. So we've developed over the past few decades a concept called building with nature, which allows us to do the reclamation, but have it be very much in tune with the natural environment and stakeholder interests.
Mm-hmm. So what about the possibility of actually building a new airport on an island, as what you're sort of studying and proposing and going to deliberations? How does it compare, let's say, with the regular airport in terms of maybe cost, in terms of the complexity of construction and the time involved?
Right. So the present airport site is facing some challenges. Environmental challenges, some mangroves will need to be cut, a hill will need to be demolished, and most of the clearances have been achieved by the government, but it's been a long process, and once they actually start cutting the mangroves, who knows, there might be more public interest litigations happening, because it's something that, if possible, could you avoid it? The other issue is that the land acquisition still has not been completed. So that's a major issue, major cost to offer rehabilitation packages to the existing landowners. So why an offshore airport in the bay? Well, for one, no further land acquisition would be required, because you're creating land anew in the middle of the bay. Since it's in the middle of the bay, you're not actually touching mangroves, because mangroves are prevalent on the coast.
On the coastline, yeah.
And therefore, everything at the existing site can stay as is. Cost of reclamation obviously is tremendous. I mean, it's quite an engineering project. We have a lot of experience with it, but we know also it's a costly affair. But if you start to compare it to the amount of money you're saving by not having to pay for the rehabilitation package for landowners, etc., the cost comparison actually is similar.
Oh.
The advantages of building it in the bay is that you can expand it to its ultimate capacity of maybe even 100 million annual passengers, which means that in another 20-25 years, Mumbai will not require a third airport. It can all be accommodated at this new airport island site. Because imagine trying to find a new site for a third airport in 25 years when land acquisition will be virtually impossible.
Right.
So these are some of the advantages that we see. And by implementing it using building with nature, we actually, on the fringes of the new island, will create new mangrove areas. So instead of reducing the mangrove areas in this MMR region, we would actually be adding to it. So the net nature area is increased instead of decreased.
And how do timescales compare? And then, of course, then it's Indian standard time, so then you add a couple of years to it. But just to understand how a project like this would work internationally.
Well, internationally, yes, of course, creating an island from scratch would take about 2.5 years just to create the island.
Right.
The area is quite shallow in terms of the water, so it's ideal actually for reclamation. So that's why we're saying we could definitely guarantee the 2.5 year time frame. And yes, it's India. There might be some delays in approvals, etc. But since very few stakeholders are now affected, we feel that it should be possible in 2.5, 3 years. Another important stakeholder, though, to take into account is the port authorities, because you're creating it in the Bay Area, and that's where all the port activity is taking place. So what we've already taken account of is that the shipping lanes for both the JNPT port and the BPT port are clear, and we're even looking at future expansion of JNPT and how can that be accommodated together with this new airport island.
Okay, so well, that's a futuristic plan. The other project on which I think you're offering some thought is also the possibility of a coastal road, if not around the entire city, but at least covering large tracts of the city, which could be a huge boon as well. Again, what is the feasibility of such a project within the Indian conditions, the Mumbai context? Right.
Well, creating the coastal road partly on reclaimed land means you're adding valuable land to the city. By maybe conceptualizing it like we are, not just as a road, but maybe as a multi-modal transportation corridor with rail, with road, with cycling, walking tracks, etc. You could actually, in effect, do without, for instance, the 4th elevated railway corridor. If you build that suburban railway corridor actually on this reclaimed corridor, just on the coast, you're saving the effort and challenges that the 4th elevated railway corridor has, and actually implementing it in a much more feasible and way, technically and financially. So we also feel that in our building with nature concept, we do not only want to have it be a win-win in that sense, but also a win-win for instance, the water management. During heavy monsoon rains, when it's a high tide, parts of Mumbai get flooded because the stormwater from the stormwater channels is not able to exit into the sea. So by creating this coastal road multimodal corridor on reclaimed land slightly offshore, you're creating buffer areas where this rainwater could be collected during the heavy monsoon, and thereby preventing flooding in the island city and the suburbs. And this concept has actually been implemented using Dutch engineering expertise for Navi Mumbai. These buffer areas were created all along Palm Beach Road. And this is one of the reasons why even during the heavy monsoon, Navi Mumbai does not actually flood. So we've shown it's possible, and we hope that it will get implemented for the coastal road as well.
Plenty of ideas. Let's see if the policymakers are listening and if we can get some changes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.